Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. It started as a dare. I was never the adventurous type, more of a history buff with a taste for old, forgotten places. My name's Owen. I'd spent the better part of the last year obsessing over the ancient tunnels beneath London, layers upon layers of catacombs, wartime bunkers, plague pits, and lost vaults that stretch beneath the city like the roots of a dead tree. When my mate Jamie told me he knew someone who could sneak us past a maintenance gate in Camden, I jumped at the chance. I thought we'd be underground for an hour, tops. Snap some photos, maybe find a dusty bottle or an old boot, and call it a night. We went down at just after midnight. Jamie brought his cousin Rick, who fancied himself an urban explorer. He had a flashlight, an extra phone battery, and a bad attitude. The tunnel entrance was narrow, tucked behind a broken gate covered in rust and ivy. The air hit me immediately, cold, damp, and old. Like breathing in the memory of something that should have stayed buried. We climbed down a rusted iron ladder and dropped into darkness. The moment my boots hit the stone floor, my phone lost signal. Not just a weak bar, nothing. Dead silence from the surface world. The first 30 minutes were exactly what I'd imagined. Tight passageways, crumbling archways, and walls covered in faded chalk markings from explorers before us. Rick led the way, muttering facts he'd read online while Jamie kept stopping to take grainy pictures. That's when we heard it. A thump, distant but deliberate, like something heavy had just landed on solid stone. We froze. Probably a rat, Rick said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. Jamie glanced behind us. Could be someone else down here, a squatter or something. We pressed on, deeper. The tunnels grew narrower, forcing us into single file. The air felt heavier. There was a smell, too, not quite mold, not quite rot, something in between. I tried brushing it off. Old air trapped for centuries. Who knew what sort of decay these walls had seen? But then we found the first body. Rick spotted it first. A man slumped against the wall, half covered in rubble. Looked like he'd been dead for days. Skin pale, eyes open, mouth hanging slack, like he'd been mid-scream. But the strangest part was the bite mark, not on his neck or arm, but on his cheek, like someone had tried to take a piece of his face. Jamie turned to run. Rick stopped him. We don't know what this is. Could be an old crime scene. We need to keep calm. I snapped a photo, unsure why. Maybe proof. Maybe denial. We turned a corner and the light started flickering. That was the first real sign something wasn't right. These tunnels were supposed to be long abandoned. No functioning lights. And yet, ahead, a single flickering bulb hung from a cable that shouldn't exist. We stepped under it, and the thumping sound returned, louder now, closer, followed by a scraping noise, like something dragging along the stone. We ran. We didn't talk about it, didn't look back, we just ran. Until the tunnel split into 3 paths and we each chose a different one. That was the last I saw of Rick and Jamie. My light flickered out. I pulled out my phone, using the flashlight feature to push back the dark. The walls around me were marked with strange symbols. Circles inside circles. Arrows pointing nowhere, and that smell was stronger now. I called out their names, nothing, not even an echo. I turned to go back, but the tunnel behind me was gone. Where there had been a narrow stone passage, there was now just a blank wall. Like the tunnel had never existed. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining it. I pressed my hand to the stone. It was solid, Cold. Real. Something down here was moving the walls. Or worse. I was no longer in control of where I was. Then I heard the first growl. Not an animal, not a person, something in between, raspy, wet, and close. I turned, and that's when I saw it. Something lurching toward me on all fours. Its limbs too long, its eyes wide and empty, its mouth gnashing as it scrambled over the stone like a spider. The thing made no sound apart from the awful clack of bone against floor. I ran, again. Only this time, the tunnels didn't feel ancient. They felt alive. The deeper I went, the more twisted everything became. Walls bent in ways they shouldn't. Floors dipped like sinking ships. I passed empty rooms, old bunkers filled with rusted gas masks and decayed stretchers. And then a voice. Whispered. Croaked. My name. Owen. It wasn't Rick. It wasn't Jamie. It wasn't even human. I ducked into a narrow crevice, turned off my light, and held my breath. Something shuffled past. It sniffed the air, clicked its teeth. Then it moved on. When I turned my light back on, I saw writing on the wall, fresh, not faded like before. The dead walk here. And beneath it, scratched deep into the stone. Don't follow the light. I didn't sleep. I don't think it's even possible down here. After seeing that message, don't follow the light, I backed away from the wall and pressed myself into a corner. I killed my flashlight again. Total blackness swallowed me, but something told me the dark was safer than being seen. I stayed there for, I don't know how long, could have been minutes, could have been an hour. There's no sense of time underground. Just cold and fear. Eventually, I had to move. The tunnel behind me was still sealed off, and the creature, whatever it was, had moved on. I turned my light back on and started forward. This time, slower, calmer. I kept one hand on the wall, the other gripping my phone like a weapon. As I crept through the darkness, I started noticing things. Not just bones, though there were plenty of those, but personal belongings. A child's shoe, a cracked phone, its screen smeared with something dark, an old necklace wrapped around a pipe like it had been yanked off. Whatever was down here, it wasn't new. It had been happening for a long time. I found a broken maintenance door and slipped inside. The room beyond looked like a forgotten World War-era storage space. Rusted tools, filing cabinets, and old maps covered in dust. I shut the door behind me and tried to breathe. And then I heard a sound that nearly broke me. Knocking. 3 slow knocks on the other side of the metal door. Then silence. Then a whisper. "Let me in, Owen." I backed away. My name. It said my name again. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the door. After a long pause, I heard it walk away. I waited 10 more minutes before I moved again. I found a map in one of the drawers. Old and yellowed, but detailed. It showed part of the Catacombs, with annotations from some explorer who must have been down here long before us. One section had been circled in red with the words, "Do not enter wakes the others," scrawled next to it. That's where I had to go. Why? I don't know. Maybe because every other path was blocked, or maybe because deep down, I already knew I was being herded. I followed the map down a curved tunnel that sloped lower and lower, the air growing thicker with every step. I had to crawl through part of it. That's when I noticed the scratch marks on the walls. Not made by animals, not natural erosion. Fingernails. Human ones. I reached a chamber filled with broken columns and toppled statues. Some kind of underground temple. It looked Roman, older than anything else I'd seen. At the far end was an altar covered in bones and surrounded by melted candles. And then I heard it. Breathing. not mine. I turned. A figure stood near the edge of the room. Tall, thin, unmoving. Its skin was pale, stretched too tight over its bones. It stared at me with hollow eyes. Then it stepped into the light. It didn't run, didn't lunge, it just stared, tilting its head, studying me. I backed away, but behind me another sound echoed, footsteps, dozens of them. I spun around and saw more of them. They were coming from the tunnel behind me, climbing down the walls, crawling from cracks in the stone. They moved like insects, limbs twitching, jaws clenching. I had no choice. I ran through the altar chamber and ducked into a side tunnel just before they reached me. It was a narrow path, low and tight. I could feel the walls closing in. The groans and scraping behind me faded, but I didn't stop until I hit a dead end. Except, it wasn't a dead end. There was a ladder. An old iron ladder bolted to the wall, leading up into the dark. Without thinking, I climbed. Every rung creaked under my weight. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. At the top was a trap door. I pushed it open and pulled myself into what looked like an old maintenance hallway. Dry, cleaner, lit by a dim red emergency bulb flickering from the ceiling. There was another body up there. A security guard slumped against the wall, uniform torn, radio shattered beside him. But his flashlight still worked. I took it. That's when I noticed something scrawled on the wall behind him in marker. They see through the dark, don't make noise, don't bleed. What did that mean? Don't bleed? As I turned to keep moving, my foot knocked over something metal. A can, loud, echoing. I froze. Then, from below the trapdoor, I heard them scream. Not words, not language, just the rising awful wail of something that wasn't supposed to exist. They knew where I was now. I had maybe seconds. The sound coming up from the trapdoor wasn't just a scream, it was a chorus of them. Dozens, maybe more. My instincts took over. I grabbed the radio from the fallen guard's side, even though it was cracked and barely holding together. Then I ran down the hallway, my flashlight cutting through the gloom in short bursts. Every few seconds it flickered, the batteries dying slow and painful. Behind me, I heard them climbing, scraping metal, clawing at the walls, the sound of bones rattling and flesh dragging against the stone. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a countdown. I turned the next corner and stopped dead. A door, reinforced. Heavy steel with a biometric scanner beside it. No way it would open. But the door wasn't the strange part. It was the wall beside it, plastered with photographs, taped papers, and a giant hand-drawn map. All of it was organized like a conspiracy board. Dates, names, infection zones, red circles. The word origin was scrawled in the center, pointing toward the lower catacomb levels. I flipped through the papers. They were from a research facility, something about viral containment breaches beneath the city, trial subjects, experiment logs. They mentioned something called Strain 0. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A photo of me, taken at the entrance to the catacombs earlier that day. Written beside it in black ink. Subject 19B, immune? What did that mean? Immune to what? My thoughts were cut short by the sudden clang of metal. The trapdoor, they were through. I had seconds. I scanned the biometric panel beside the steel door. It was cracked, but the lens still glowed faintly. I looked down at the guard's hand, the one I'd passed earlier, and ran back. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to get near that body again. But I had no choice. I forced the cold, stiff fingers over the scanner. It took 2 tries. Then a beep. Green light. The door hissed open. I threw myself inside and slammed it shut behind me, locking every bolt I could find. I could still hear the things pounding on the other side, but they didn't get through. At least not yet. The room was different from the tunnels. It looked like a lab. Broken machines, shattered monitors, strange tanks filled with dark liquid. Everything smelled sterile. But beneath it, there was another scent, like rust and rot. Something was leaking from one of the sealed tubes in the wall. Inside was something vaguely human-shaped. But it wasn't human. Its face had no mouth, just a stretched layer of skin. Its eyes were milky, its body pale and thin. Tubes were still hooked into its chest, like it had been feeding on something. Written on the tube in faded lettering. Test subject Z001. Status dormant. I stepped away. That's when I heard something behind me. The static crackle of the radio. I hadn't turned it on. A click. Then a voice, soft and distorted. "You're not supposed to be down here." I froze. "Who are you?" Static. "It's watching you now. It wants to know if you can hear it." "Who? What's watching me?" No response. Then, just breathing. Heavy, wet, slow. I turned the radio off and backed away. That's when I noticed the camera in the corner, still powered. The red light blinked. Watching me, recording. I pulled a tarp over it. This place wasn't just a lab, it was some kind of observation chamber. But for who or what? Suddenly, the lights in the room started dimming, one by one. From bright white to red to nothing. The emergency system kicked in. A low alarm sounded. Not loud, but deep, rhythmic, like a pulse. And beneath the noise, I heard movement in the ceiling. I shined my light up. Vents, something crawling. Fast. I bolted through the back exit of the lab, forcing open a door that led into another stretch of tunnels. But this wasn't like the catacombs. These walls were smooth, concrete, marked with faded paint lines like an old underground facility. I followed a sign that read Evac Zone B, hoping, just hoping, it led somewhere safe. That's when the ground began to shake. Dirt rained from the ceiling. Cracks split through the walls. Something huge was moving beneath the floor. The hallway ahead exploded as a hulking creature burst through the concrete. I dove behind an overturned cabinet just in time. It wasn't like the others. This one was taller than a man, hunched and covered in pale muscle with no eyes. Its face was just teeth and twitching skin, like it had never stopped evolving. Its head jerked left and right, sniffing the air, its neck bulging with every breath. I held mine. It crept closer, dragging one claw along the wall, tapping in rhythm, like it was listening for echoes. I didn't move, didn't blink. After a moment, it turned and disappeared down the corridor. I exhaled, slow. Then I saw the symbol on its back, burned into its skin. Z001. The dormant test subject from the lab was no longer dormant. I ran as fast as I could. I don't even remember which tunnels I took, just that I didn't stop until my legs gave out. Eventually, I collapsed in another chamber. This one looked like a command post. Dust-covered but not ancient. Someone had been living here. There was food, maps, logs. A digital recorder sat beside a lantern. I pressed play. A woman's voice. British. Calm but strained. If you're hearing this, it means containment failed. The strain mutated, faster than we expected. We sealed the upper tunnels, but something made it out. We tried to stop it, but the infection spreads even in the air now. Avoid breathing too deeply. Don't let them touch you. And if you find subject Z001, Do not engage, you won't survive. The message cut off there. The recorder's battery died. I sat in silence. I was infected air, crawling creatures, surveillance systems. What had I wandered into? But the most terrifying part wasn't the creatures. It was the realization that someone, or something, was still down here. Still watching. And maybe worse, still in control. The recorder's message echoed in my head. Don't let them touch you. I checked my arms, my neck, my legs. Nothing. No scratches, no bites, no signs that I'd been exposed. But I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Infected air. What if it was already in me? What if I was just a few hours behind the others? I shook the thought off. I didn't have the luxury of fear right now. I had to keep moving. The maps on the wall weren't easy to read. Most of them were hand-drawn, ink smeared with age or water. But there was one marked in red that stood out. A route labeled Exfil Secure, unconfirmed, ran from the lower research levels all the way up to a forgotten maintenance shaft, supposedly leading to an old drainage tunnel just beyond the river. It was my only shot. I packed what I could, some protein bars, a flashlight with a little more juice, and a set of old security keys I found in a drawer. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the scraping, uneven dragging of the creatures. Real, human footsteps. I killed the lantern and ducked behind a crate. A voice, muffled and low, echoed through the corridor. Male, British. Calm. Confirmed movement. Subject 19B is still mobile. Proceeding to intercept. They were looking for me. And they knew exactly who I was. Two figures stepped into view. Both wore some kind of tactical gear, scarred black armor, gas masks, and rifles fitted with long suppressors. They didn't look like soldiers, more like private security. Or worse, cleanup crew. I didn't breathe. One of them swept a flashlight across the room. The beam stopped inches from my hiding spot. Then moved on. Clear, the voice said, but he's close. I waited until they passed, then slipped out the opposite door, quiet as I could. I stayed low, crawling through the shadows of the facility halls until I found the staircase marked on the red map. It led down. Deeper. Every instinct screamed to go up, but if that exit was real, I had to follow the route all the way. I gripped the railing and descended. The temperature dropped fast. The walls were wet. Mold bloomed in every corner, and the smell was thicker here, not just rot, but something metallic, like iron or blood. The lower levels weren't just forgotten. They were sealed for a reason. The hall ended in a security checkpoint, half buried in rubble, but just passable. I squeezed through a broken panel and found myself inside another lab. But this one was different. The walls were lined with holding tanks, dozens of them, all broken, all empty. Cracked glass and splashes of dried something stained the floor. Some of the tanks still had names on them, not just codes. Marla Stage 2, Dwight Stage 3, Zoe Unknown Progression. I kept moving, stepping over shattered equipment and overturned stretchers. Then I found the operating room, and inside a mirror. The first one I'd seen down here. I looked at myself. Face pale, eyes red from lack of sleep. My lips were cracked, my skin coated in dust and dried sweat. But there was something else. My pupils, dilated too much. I leaned closer and saw veins beneath my skin, dark and branching, like ink in water. No, I whispered. Had I been exposed? I reached for the recorder on the nearest table, praying it had something, anything useful. I pressed play. A woman's voice again, the same one from earlier, this time more frantic. Test subject 19B shows delayed reaction. No violent symptoms, no loss of control, but the infection, it's there, it's adapting, learning. We can't stop it. But maybe he's the key. If he survives the next few hours, it might mean hope. They were watching me, studying me, not to stop the infection, but to see what it did, to see what I became. I dropped the recorder and backed out of the room. Then I heard the scream, a real human scream, not distant, not distorted through walls. Close. I ran toward it. It echoed through another tunnel, and at the end I saw her, barely lit by emergency lighting. A woman in a tattered white coat, limping and clutching her side. She looked up, startled, but didn't scream when she saw me. You're him, she said. Who are you? I asked. I worked on the project. I didn't think anyone made it out. I rushed to her side. What happened here? What is this place? She shook her head. We were told we were helping prevent outbreaks, studying immunity. But it wasn't about prevention, it was about enhancement. Weaponizing what couldn't be controlled. She coughed, and blood touched her lip. How do I get out? There's a way. Through the lower tunnels, the drain shaft. I was heading there too, but I don't think I'm going to make it. She handed me a small card, keyed to open something, I assumed. Keep going, she said. Whatever you are, you're not like the others. I opened my mouth to reply, but the ceiling above us exploded. Concrete rained down. The woman screamed, and I pulled her away just in time as a massive claw tore through the floor above. It was Z001 again. Its face had changed, more teeth, more eyes, growing, twisting. It dropped through the ceiling and landed with a crash. I didn't wait. I grabbed the woman and ran. We raced through another tunnel, turning corners blindly, hearing the beast crash through the walls behind us, howling with something that sounded almost like language. I found a blast door and slammed my new keycard against the panel. Green light. The door opened. We dove inside as the door slammed shut. Darkness again. We were in the final zone. I could feel it. The pressure in the air, the size of the walls. This was a service tunnel connected to something older. A narrow ladder led upward, toward a grate marked Storm Overflow 9B. The woman nodded. That's it. That's your exit. You're coming with me. She shook her head, coughing again. Her breathing was shallow. I've been exposed too long. But you're changing, and not like the others. Maybe you're the first to survive it. I hesitated, then climbed. As I reached the top of the ladder, I turned back, but she was already gone. The darkness below swallowed her, and I was alone again. At the edge of the surface, at the edge of whatever I was becoming. The grate above me groaned as I pushed it open. Rust flaked off in brittle sheets, clinging to my hands as I emerged into a wide tunnel. It looked like an old overflow chamber, its walls rounded and slick with condensation. A trickle of water flowed through the center channel, whispering its way deeper into the earth. I pulled myself out, careful not to make noise. Whatever was chasing me, whatever had become of Z001, it might still be close. The chamber had a faint glow coming from above, sewer grates, maybe, faint beams of city light piercing through the gloom. It was the first glimpse of the outside world I'd seen in what felt like hours. 12 hours. That was the mark. If the woman was right and I was infected, then this was the window, the transformation point. But I didn't feel like them. Not fully. Not yet. My head throbbed, though. My heart beat out of rhythm, and the dark lines under my skin had spread, my veins blackened like wires beneath my flesh. But I still thought, still felt, still chose. It had to mean something. I found a rusted maintenance panel built into the wall and pried it open. Inside were scattered old tools, a flare, and, luck of all luck, a map. This time it was printed, faded but readable. I was in Overflow Sector 9B just like the keycard had said. According to the map, the overflow tunnel connected to a runoff drain that curved beneath the Thames. If I followed it, it would take me near Blackfriars, where there was still a chance of finding a way out. I started walking. My footsteps echoed with every step. Each splash in the water sounded like a thunderclap. I didn't like it. If I could hear myself this clearly, so could everything else. After 10 minutes, I found more signs of damage: collapsed pipework, torn cables, and claw marks gouged deep into the stone. Whatever had passed through here had grown since the last time I saw it. Then I found the bodies. 3 of them. Men in tactical gear, the same as the ones who were hunting me earlier. Their masks were shattered, their faces twisted in agony. But what caught my attention was the state of their gear. It had melted, warped by something corrosive, like acid had splashed across their bodies. Or worse, like they had exploded from the inside. I turned away and kept walking faster. And then I heard the humming. Low, mechanical, rhythmic. I followed it cautiously until the tunnel opened into a massive subterranean chamber, circular and reinforced, with walkways around the edges. In the center was a strange machine. It stood like an altar, cables wrapped around its base and vanishing into the walls. Tubes fed into canisters filled with black liquid that pulsed and glowed like it was alive. It was a dispersal unit. I recognized the design from the upper labs. And suddenly, it clicked. The infection hadn't leaked. It had been released. This place wasn't a lab. It was a field test site, and I was the subject. I backed away, but the moment I did, alarms shrieked to life. Red lights spun from overhead. The machine lit up, pumping harder, faster. I heard doors slamming shut all around me. Trapped. Then, from the far end of the chamber, I saw them. The creatures. At least 10, maybe more. Each twisted in its own awful way. One dragged 3 legs behind it, another had no eyes, only ears stretched wide like bat wings. But they all moved with purpose. And behind them, the beast, Z001. No longer human, no longer even close. It was larger now. Its limbs stretched long like scaffolding, its face distorted into a gaping, permanent grin of fangs. But its eyes, it recognized me, and it hated what I was. I ran. The walkways were narrow, the pipes overhead barely holding my weight as I scrambled across them. The creatures followed, screeching and snarling, leaping at me as I ducked and weaved. I reached the far end, slammed my shoulder into a panel, and jammed the keycard in. The door hissed open. I dove through just as one of them lunged, its claws missing me by inches. The door slammed shut. I kept running. The corridor beyond was older, arched stone and moss-slick bricks. A forgotten maintenance route. I heard water rushing somewhere ahead, faster now. That had to mean I was close to the runoff drain. A ladder appeared in the gloom. I climbed, my arms trembling, my vision blurring from exhaustion. The infection, or whatever it was gaining ground. My hands trembled as I reached the top and kicked open the final grate. Cold air hit me like a slap. I rolled out onto a damp concrete embankment, the river just feet away. The night sky above was black, but it was there. Freedom, the surface, but I wasn't alone. Across the river, I saw movement, military trucks, people in hazmat suits, floodlights scanning the horizon. And then a voice over a loudspeaker, mechanical and calm. If you are uninfected, step forward. Identify yourself. Remain still. I stumbled up, raising my hands. But the moment the lights touched my face, I heard the tone change. Subject confirmed. Containment breach. Prepare suppression. Guns lifted. Lasers painted my chest. "No!" I shouted. "I'm not like them. I'm still me." But I saw their faces, tight with fear, not curiosity, not hope. They weren't here to help me. They were here to end it. I turned and ran back toward the tunnel. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't trust the lab. I couldn't trust the surface. And beneath it all, something inside me was changing. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. I didn't stop running until the floodlights faded behind me. My lungs were on fire. My vision pulsed with every heartbeat. I collapsed behind a concrete divider and watched through the cracks as boots pounded past. Armed figures in biohazard gear spread out across the embankment, sweeping the area with flashlights and scanners. I wasn't even a person to them anymore. Just a number, a subject. The wind was bitter and cold. The city skyline loomed in the distance, dark, broken in places. London wasn't itself anymore. I could tell just by the way the sirens never stopped, and the air tasted like ash and electricity. Something big was happening. And whatever I had inside me, I was part of it now. But I still had time. 12 hours, that's what she said. I checked my watch. 11 hours, 37 minutes. Every tick was louder now. Not from the watch, but in my head. Tick, tick, tick. I crawled back into the runoff pipe before they spotted me and followed it upstream. It took me beneath more of the old city, past forgotten platforms, rusted gates and stairwells that hadn't seen footsteps in decades. Somewhere above me, life was still pretending to be normal. But not for long. The infection wasn't contained. I had seen enough to know that. It wasn't just spreading through bites. It was airborne, waterborne, maybe even baked into the walls of this place. The outbreak hadn't started in the tunnels. The outbreak started because of the tunnels. They built the labs underground so no one would see, so no one would question the strange trucks or missing people. But these walls remember. Every stone down here carries the echoes of something older, and now something newer, something worse. I came to a narrow passage blocked by a sealed iron door. There was a panel. Dead, power long gone. But beside it, an old service tunnel just wide enough to crawl through. I hesitated, not because of fear, but because of what I was starting to see at the edges of my vision. The black veins on my arms now glowed faintly in the dark. My reflection in a broken water pipe didn't show my face anymore. It showed something that used to be me. But not quite. Still, my mind was mine. And I wasn't giving it up without a fight. I entered the tunnel. It felt like crawling through a grave. The air was thick, stale, full of mildew. Something scraped above me, pipes settling, or maybe something else moving through the walls. But at the end, light. A soft, flickering orange glow. I slid out onto a ledge overlooking a chamber unlike anything I'd seen before. It was round, perfectly round, and covered in carvings. Old ones. Older than the city itself. Some of them pulsed with the same glow running through my veins. At the center of the chamber stood a pillar of stone and metal fused together, wrapped in vines and wires and bones. And around its survivors, not like the monsters, Not soldiers either, just regular people. Dirty, shaking, some injured, some armed with makeshift tools and flashlights. They stared at me when I dropped down. Some screamed, others just raised weapons. But one stepped forward. An older man with a limp and one eye clouded with a white film. He looked at my arms, my face, and nodded. "You came from the lab," he said. "Didn't you?" "Yes." "You still think clearly?" I nodded. His eyes narrowed. "Then we don't have much time." He explained everything, what they'd pieced together from whispers in the dark, from lost notes and half-burned memos. The lab wasn't just testing a virus. They were trying to bind it to memory, to preserve consciousness inside the infection. A cure wasn't the goal. Control was. Mind over matter, a living, thinking infected. But it didn't work, not the way they planned. Only one in thousands kept any awareness. The rest became what I saw in the dark. But me? I was the exception. They called it the conduit. And now I was it. "If you can resist the change," the old man said, "you might be the key to stopping this, or you might be the one that ends us all." The room grew quiet. I could feel the others watching, hoping, fearing. I didn't want any of this. But I remembered Z001's eyes. I remembered the sound of the machine coming to life. And I remembered the look on the soldiers' faces when they aimed their weapons at me. They didn't care if I lived, or what I knew, or what I could do. But these people, they still believed in something. Even if it was just surviving the night, I made my choice. It's been just over 12 hours now. I feel it, the full weight of the change. My blood no longer feels like mine. My eyes don't see the same way they used to. I can hear footsteps echoing 5 floors above me. I can smell rot from a mile away. But I still know who I am. They didn't win. Not yet. And now, down here beneath the streets of London, among the broken catacombs and forgotten dead, I'm not running anymore. I'm planning. Because the outbreak may have started with them, but the end, that's going to start with me. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.